Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Falling Hard for Romantasy panel. My name is Nicole, and I'll be moderating this session. I'm so excited to welcome our authors, Heba Al-Wasity, the author of Weaving Shaw, Keshe Chow, the author of Strange Familiars, Amy Delaforce, the author of A Kiss of Hammer and Flame, Braidee Otto, the author of Songbird of the Sorrows, and Madeline Taylor, the author of Heir of Illusion. So, can you each introduce yourself and your book?
Hi, I'm Heba. I'm written Weaving Shaw, which is coming out in February.
Hi, I'm Keshe Chow. I am the author of Strange Familiars, which is an academic rivals to lovers adult fantasy about a magical veterinary school where they treat witches, familiars, and mythical creatures.
Hi, my name is Amy Delaforce, and I'm the debut author of Romantasy, A Kiss of Hammer and Flame. It's the story of Kara, a blacksmith who forges a sword, triggers a prophecy about an ancient empire's lost capital, and unleashes a dark immortal with the power to shape or shatter worlds.
And I'm Braidee Otto. I'm also a debut of Romantasy, although my book was originally self-published. It's called Songbird of the Sorrows. It's coming out in February, and it's about a undercover princess turned spy who has to infiltrate a rival kingdom.
Hi, I'm Madeline Taylor, author of Heir of Illusion, which comes out February 10th. It's the story of an assassin who is chained to a ruthless king through a magical collar that she can't remove, and it's her search for freedom.
Thank you thank you everyone. So, we're going to start with our question portion. Let's start with Heba. So, did you have specific classic Gothic romance works that inspired elements of Weaving Shaw?
So, Weaving Shaw is a gothic romantic fantasy. It's about a girl who she can see ghosts and she sells her secret to a master of secrets. I live near the moors, near Bronte country, so I was very much inspired by all the old works, the Victorian works, Frankenstein, Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights. I had a very big obsession with Jane Eyre at some point in my life. So I tried to incorporate all these gothic elements into the book, as an homage to all these great works. So I filled it up with ghosts and haunted estates and secrets and all the gothic things that we're very familiar with, and I've tried to add my own twist to it.
Thank you. Kish, Seymour, the Magical Veterinarian School, is a fun twist to the traditional magic school or academia setting. Did you have a specific inspiration for the competitive magical veterinarian setting?
Well, I think I've spoken about this quite a lot, but I actually am a vet myself. So a lot of the kind of like more human interactions were inspired from things that happened to me throughout my own life in vet school or throughout my career. Obviously, I wasn't treating dragons and centaurs and fun things like that, but we did do like things with horses and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's sort of like where it came from. And so like when I was sort of deciding what to write, everyone was always saying like, oh, you should write about like vet stuff because you know so much about vet stuff. And I was like, oh no, that's like way too boring. That's just like my day job. But then someone was like, well, you could make it interesting. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll make it like magical vets, and that would be like way more interesting. So that's kind of where the inspiration grew from.
Thank you so much. Amy, how would you describe Kara, the protagonist? Correct me if I'm wrong with the pronunciation there. Her complicated history and her personal journey.
So she's a blacksmith, but she's also a survivor, she's very physically strong as well as, I guess, strong in the fact that, she's resilient, she's grown up with adversity, she started out a beggar in this story, and so I feel like deep down she kind of feels a bit broken. I guess. You know, she's not so sure who she can trust, and you really see that in her interactions with people, the lack of friends and support network that she has around her. But at the same time, you know, she's young, so she's hopeful, even though she's kind of that, you know, there's mental health representation around, you know, being quite anxious all the time. I think with her personal journey, it's very much about that journey to self-actualization and kind of worthiness, like in your own eyes, and growing to a point where you want to be able to feel peace in yourself and then eventually also love.
Thank you. Braidee, what was your favorite part of creating the aviary, the spy military unit, and its detailed hierarchy?
Um, I think the most interesting part was trying to come up with all the different code names, which are different bird breeds and species. And I know so much about birds now. It's actually it's one of those little tidbits of random information that you can probably pull out at a party and talk about. Um, but I think that was probably the most challenging part as well. Like the rest of it, like you've got the songbirds, which are the spies, and then you've got the nightwings, which are the assassins, and then the owls, who are the knowledge keepers, and then right at the very top, you've got the eagle. And I think that there is a natural hierarchy within the bird, like the bird kingdom itself, that I kind of just borrowed from. But definitely the most fun part was coming up with the code names.
Thanks. Madeline, Ivy, your protagonist, is a Fey Wraith from the Seventh Isle who specializes in illusion magic. How did you create the different levels and forms of Fey magic, which each depend on what Isle the Fey themselves are from?
Yeah, so I knew that I wanted to have the aisles have each one has like its own theme that influences the magic. So we have life, we have love and hate, war, chaos, death, accords, illusion, and divination. So Ivy lives in the Isle of Illusion. So I really wanted to play with the idea of like trickery and how the different ways you could trick someone, whether it be manipulating what they're seeing in their mind, making yourself invisible, creating a copy of yourself, creating a spell, creating, shifting your body into something monstrous, like all the different ways that you can trick people into seeing something that they didn't know you were. So.
Thank you. Very Fey of them. All right, so let's move on to question two. Um, and if there's something that someone mentions that you want to discuss or that relates to your work, you're welcome to also, jump in after they answer. So let's go back to Heba. How did you balance the depictions of grief and loss in this work while keeping Lena a well-rounded character?
So I work as a doctor, and in my work, I see so many patients who are grief-stricken or go through unimaginable loss. And I think the thing that's always stricken me is how much, even though they're going through things I can't even imagine going through, how much joy they still have, how much humor, lightheartedness, love. Something my patients always say to me, I always hear it probably like on a weekly basis. If we don't laugh, we cry. And I always found that very beautiful. Lena experiences grief, but she's not defined by her grief. She sits with it, but that's not all to her. So it's very important that she's very multifaceted and that there's many, many layers to her and many layers to all the characters in the book, where even though they go through hard times, they're not just their hard times.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Kish, in your book, magic is something you need to buy. Some use it frugally and others ostentatiously. How did you create the magical currency in the magic monopoly held by Mage Corp and Linksphere?
Well, I guess when I write books about magic, I kind of always want there to be some sort of stakes to using that magic because I think that it is really easy as an author to want to come in and kind of play God and just be like, I'm just going to give everyone like, superpowers and like be able to get them out of any situation. And it just like, it feels like really, really amazing. Like you're just like, I can do anything. But then you're like, hang on, but then this is just like gonna like create like no conflict in the story. So I think as an author, it's always nice to have some sort of like cost of using magic. And I really like the idea that there's like some sort of like drawback, whether that's like a physical drawback, but in this case, it's like a monetary drawback. And because this is set in our world, and I feel like, especially in our current society, like we live in a very capitalistic society where everything is like monetized, everything is commercialized, everything is like very, 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 very corporatized. And so I felt as though in a world where magic is used, if it was set in like current times in like an alternate world where we would live in, like that's how magic would run. Like that's how things would work. Like magic would just not be free. Someone would have come along and like commodified it basically. So that's kind of like where it came from. And then it obviously like creates like big stakes for the main character because she's like the only less fortunate student in an academic setting full of very privileged students. And so she's the only one that's struggling to like keep up the ability to use magic so that she can still continue getting her marks that she needs to make the Ducks position to get top of the class, which is like her sole goal. But she has to do it at like far greater cost to herself because she doesn't have the means to just go and buy magic so easily. So yeah, that's where it came from. And I think it came from a personal place because I was actually like a scholarship student at a private girls' school in Melbourne, Australia. So I lived through that experience. Like I was someone who came into a very, very like very privileged like girls' school around people who never really had to think about money. As someone who came from very, very sort of working class background, and so yeah, like I was an immigrant, and so kind of like I always felt a little bit out of place. Like I was always a little bit on a back foot, had to work a bit harder than everyone else to like get through school. And so, yeah, so it sort of like came from a place of lived experience as well.
Thank you so much. Um, Amy, you depict characters from different kingdoms, all ranks of society, including royals and various trades. How did a character's background help you shape their role, interaction with others, and if they were reliable narrators?
Ooh, I like that one. I think that it kind of came from both sides at once. So some of it is personality driving, and some of it is like lived history driving. So if you think about Kara, she comes from a trade, and that trade is very practical. So she's a blacksmith, she's pragmatic, she's straight talking, she solves problems with action, and she really respects other people that have those similar sorts of traits. I think the reliable narrator question is really interesting because when you think about that type of person, you think they're going to be like quite a reliable narrator. What I like about Kara is that even though she's kind of got this learned vigilance from the type of life that she's had prior to her blacksmithing, um, there are aspects to her that are also quite like innocent and naive when it comes to her interactions with the nobility within the world. And it's interesting because she has borne the brunt of their cruelty, but not so much that deeper strategic thinking. And that's kind of where she needs to come to grips with how people like that work. And it's something that she has to learn pretty quickly once she goes on the run.
Thank you so much. Um, Braidee, readers see realistic and respectful depictions of mental illness, including PTSD like flashbacks, panic attacks, and anxiety. Could you talk more about your portrayal of mental illness in this work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think mental illness is something that needs to be handled with such great care in literary works. And I knew like it was always going to be such an integral part of Ayala's character, and particularly for me because at the point of writing this, I was at a very low point in myself, and I do feel like the writing journey was my way of exploring that and working through that. So of course, a lot of that did come through in the final story. Um, And like, I suppose similarly, a little like the only few parts of myself that are in Ayala is probably her empathy as well. And I think that's also something that I learned from reading books. And I think that's because there are so many great works that do explore it and address it and show characters overcoming like their own boundaries. And having these experiences. So I knew that that was something that I really wanted to explore within this story, and how that forms her character and how it informs her actions and how the world around her kind of either exacerbates it or alleviates it. So it was like really interesting to kind of go through the work and think like how would this situation impact her mental health, like with her anxieties and the things that kind of contribute to or add new kind of traumatic situations that exacerbate her PTSD. And I think it's one of those things that I had to handle really delicately because some of it I'm writing from my own experience. So I kind of know how someone would experience it, even though it is different and unique for every different person. And I think one really valuable part of the process was then having sensitivity readers who have had those other experiences to go through it and make sure that what I'm portraying is actually genuine and authentic and isn't going to upset anyone. Um, yeah, so I think definitely something that needs to be handled with care, but also recognize that if someone has something like anxiety, it's not something that only pops up at certain situations. Like it's a very vital part of her character, and it's carried with her throughout the whole story. So it's important for her actions and her thought processes to reflect that at all times.
Thank you so much. Madeline, what was your inspiration to have Thorn, our love interest, as a Grim Reaper?
Yeah, so I grew up watching the show Supernatural. Don't know if we have any fans in the house, but the Reapers kind of play a big role throughout the series. We meet them early on and they stay forever. And I always thought it was really interesting, this idea of like an angel of death. And I wanted Thorn to be someone who he's separated from everyone else. You know, it's like this invisible barrier between him and the rest of the characters. And so death is like everyone's natural fear, that thing that nobody wants to get close to. And he represents that because he is a Grim Reaper. You know, even his touch alone could kill someone. So it's very isolating. It separates him from everyone else until he meets, you know, our girl, Ivy. Um, and so that is why I went with the Grim Reaper.
Thank you. Um, so we're now off to question number 3. Heba, Lena's parents were, and correct me with my pronunciation here, Algaran refugees who settled in Moorland, and Lena was born in a refugee camp. How did you translate parts of your refugee experience into her family's?
So my parents, they fled Iraq, in the 90s due to the war. And at that point, if you leave Iraq, Saddam Hussein would kill you, come back. So they kind of had no home for some time. They went from Jordan to Libya. And during that period of unsettlement, I was born. So my name Heba means gift from God, but really I was a mistake. They just rebranded me in the best possible way. So it was I was born there, and then we applied everywhere to get accepted, and we finally got accepted through the immigration program to Canada. So we migrated to Canada when I was either 11 months old or 18 months old. I'm not entirely sure. But that's the crux of it, where I don't really know my own story. It's all through my parents, and I've only ever known about my homeland, Iraq, from my parents. So I grew up in Canada and I moved to the UK when I was 18. And even though I love both these countries so much, I'm so grateful they accepted us. I'm always searching for kind of a home, a place to take root in. And I think that's what Lena's search is as well, because she's also a refugee. She's also gone from place to place. And I think she's also trying to find some place that she could just settle and then just take root in.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Um, Yeesh. Gwendolyn and Harrisford work together to solve a high-stakes mystery, trying to figure out the issue, potential suspects, and even a break-in. When in the writing process did you realize that suspense and paranormal mystery elements would have a key role in your book?
Like from the beginning. I think yeah, like I said earlier, I've been a veterinarian for like a long time, and so I knew that I wanted to bake in all of this like this veterinary content, but I wanted to make it like way more interesting than like just like my day to day. And so I wanted to bring in all of the magical elements and make it like a really whimsical world, because I wanted it to feel magical. I wanted it to feel like, we could be living in this world and there could just be magic around every corner, and there could be, creatures walking amongst us, like, instead of people keeping horses in their stables, they keep unicorns. Instead of riding instead of like, taking airplanes around, or airplanes, however you say it in the States. I don't know. It's like different terminology everywhere you go. You would like ride a dragon to go like a short trip, rather than taking a private jet or whatever. And so, yeah, I just wanted it to feel really like there was just like magic exploding out of every corner. And so that was like very much baked in from the very, very beginning.
Thank you. Amy, how did the three kingdoms, I'm going to try to pronounce them here, uh, Koliath, Lumino, and Ozumbre, and their centuries-long civil war guide the layout and map of Hailstromia and the Empire?
Yeah. So interestingly, so I'm a character writer, and that's what I usually come into a story with. And this story is the first time I didn't have that. I had the idea for it first. So it was in my head, it was always about three kingdoms surrounding this shattered, lost capital and warring over it to get, I guess, like the treasure in the middle, really. The ultimate weapon. So the map had been in my head for a long time, and really it was just the placement of what kingdom goes where. And because I've got the all-seeing eye as inverted, and it speaks to the pyramid that's in the capital, and a lot of kind of symbolism of what happens in the story. Yeah, it was just figuring out what kingdom went in which corner. But the other thing that I did is in the pandemic I did masterclass course, and it was N.K. Jemison's SFF course, and it was so good for just figuring out the geography of world building and what I guess different zones and climates were what I needed for each kingdom based on the kind of cultures that I was trying to build and that type of thing, the type of personality traits that different kingdoms really honed in on. So yeah, a lot of it was kind of baking in the world building once I had the blocking of the map of where things were going. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Braidee, ancient Greek mythology and the Greek language are a major inspiration for your work. Were you inspired by the ancient Greek mythos around birds, or did a different mythology around birds inspire the aviary's bird name hierarchy and the bird theme overall?
Um, in a roundabout way, yes and no. There's no specific myth that I really kind of like leaned into or borrowed from, but the gods within the worlds are the Anemoi, the Greek gods of the winds. So of course, like a lot of that had a big impact on the world building. Like the sky is essentially this divine domain. So, of course, the creatures of the sky are going to have importance as well. And that is actually explored in one of the earlier chapters a little bit about how where the main character is from. So, the Sorrows, which is the Southern Isle Kingdom, although it wasn't always an Isle Kingdom, like after the God War, and they kind of like broke away from the rest of the mainland, they were quite isolated. So birds were very important to their survival, whether that was like for hunting or for messengers and delivering correspondence to other kingdoms. So that is essentially why they became the, I suppose, icon for the aviary. But then like the aviary itself, of course, there is like a lot in terms of themes of like freedom and captivity within the story. And birds are one of the biggest symbols for freedom, but they're also something that can be quite easily captured and held captive. And I really liked playing around with that concept within the story as well. So that was probably the main points of inspiration there rather than a specific myth.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Um, Madeline, there are different mortal, immortal, and otherworldly beings in Solmar? Solmare. How did you approach balancing the power of gods, the fates, fae, and other beings?
Yeah, so I knew that I didn't want any one group to be truly all powerful. I wanted to create this sort of like ladder of the hierarchy, and the higher you go on the ladder, the more secretive it becomes. So while no one's all powerful, the people at the top, you don't really know exactly what their weaknesses are because that's kept very secret. So it's this kind of balance between like showing that power and then also keeping things under wraps so that, we kind of give sneak peeks of it in book one, but we delve into that a lot more in book two, like especially with the fates and the other gods. So yeah, I'm very excited for everybody to get book two.
Well, thank you so much. Heba, your works depicts ghosts, specters, and phantoms. Did a specific kind of ghost lore guide your choice on what elements to include, like that they can't go into a salt circle?
So I grew up in a very superstitious family. Everything had kind of a double meaning. I think just being Iraqi and having this kind of cultural context to my background. So, for instance, I wasn't allowed to sweep the ground after dark because apparently it brought bad luck. I'm not sure how, but it just did. Just don't ask questions. And then, so the reason I chose salt specifically was because it comes from the ground and it connects Lena to the ground, and ghosts are ungrounded beings, so they wouldn't be able to cross such an earthly object. So I just had a lot of fun creating meaning in the lore and then trying to find out reasons behind different elements or gothic elements, and then I just hope that readers go away with their own interpretation of whatever they read.
Definitely, definitely. I do think it is a solid like lore around ghosts in this world for sure. Um, Keish, Gwendolyn is in the magical familiar stream at her school, whereas Harrisford is in the mythical creatures stream. We meet a variety of animals like cats and bearded dragons, but we also meet unicorns and Quilin? Which were your
Feelings.
Keelans? Which were your
Feelings.
favorite animals and mythical creatures to research?
Ah, that's a really good question. I loved researching all of the animals. I mean, I loved researching the chilins because that's from my culture. So they're like the what is considered to be the Chinese version of unicorns, even though they don't really look anything like unicorns. They've got like every Chinese mythical creature, they have like a whole mishmash of elements drawn in from like other mythical creatures, like they've got like two horns, like antlers, and they've got like dragon heads and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, they were really really fun to research, and I had researched them from some of my other work as well, because a lot of my previous work, my young adult fiction, has kind of been rooted in Chinese mythology. So I've done a lot of research into sort of like the mythology of my own culture. But yeah, I mean, I just love writing about animals because obviously like I am an animal lover, I'm a veterinarian, I have cats. I know that you mentioned that you have a noisy cat before, Nicole. I have a noisy cat as well, just like listening to her like crying because she's just like been, like she's like, where's my breakfast? You're like, you're late. And so yeah, I just love writing about all the animals, and while it was amazing to be writing about all these incredible mythical creatures like dragons and stuff like that. To be honest, my favorite character to write was Percy the cat because like I am a cat lover, and I'm actually a cat vet, like that's my specialty. And so I've never written a cat character before, and it was just so fun writing this character that could communicate because Gwendolyn obviously that's her familiar, and so he can communicate with her. And so, I always imagine my cats talking to me. I talk to them as well. Like when we were during COVID times, we're not allowed to have clients in the clinic. So we had contactless consults. If any of you who had pets probably experienced that yourself. We just had the cats in our consult room, and I would just be yapping away to them. I'd just be like chatting away to them, and anyone like sort of would be looking in on would be like, why are you talking to this creature? But I mean, I just love talking to my cats and to any cats, and I always imagine them talking back to us. So yeah, I think it was really fun to be able to like conceptualize that and actually create a character that had the personality of a cat, but could actually, verbalize that and in a very like, cat-like way. So he was fun to write.
Thank you so much. And Percy has a very strong voice. So, Amy.
I should actually, oh, sorry.
Oh,
I
sorry.
just wanted
You
to
go ahead.
say
You
one
go
more
ahead.
thing.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I just wanted to say he actually was inspired by my own cat that passed away. So I feel like I immortalized him forever because yeah, a few years ago my old black cat he passed very suddenly. And so yeah, I just feel like I've been able to bring him to the page and now he'll live forever. So yeah.
Definitely. I think so. I think that's a beautiful way to memorialize him for sure. Um, Amy, what was your favorite part of creating your prophecy in the related ancient oracles and seers lore?
So many bits. I wrote a tiny poem, which is hilarious because I'm terrible at poetry. So it's not even like a good poem. It rhymes a little bit. But so that's my prophecy. I think there's like four lines, three of them are omens, and it somehow kind of fits together. And I was like, yes, I've done something, hooray! Because I'm not a poetry person. What else? In the story, there's always a triad of oracles, a woman, a man, and a non-binary person. So it was really exciting to kind of go back to ancient times and look at the difference between how I'd kind of envisioned these types of characters before everything happened and the capital kind of broke in upon itself, and then bringing that to the present day and what that's in particular going to look like in book two is really cool. I did lots of research on things like, like Pythia, the Oracle of Delphi. I incorporated a bunch of my own random interests, so things like meditation and Wicca and paganism and all different types of divination. I thought about trying to narrow it down to just maybe like one thing, like pyromancy, because there's a lot of fire magic in my book, and so I thought maybe I can have them be fire seers. But I ended up feeling like it just felt like too one note, and I wanted to bring in all the other things I love, like tarot and crystal balls and obsidian mirrors and all these sorts of random little artifacts. So, bringing in a lot of my interests and just crazy random research throughout the ages. And then also in book two, weaving in the story of how the seers in my books actually came to be in the first place. There's a little bit of that around the original oracles towards the end of the book, but book two really kind of goes digging into, well, how did any of the seers, the magic, how did any of this happen in the first place? And so that was really cool. I like kind of like digging and doing in the research. So yes.
Thank you so much. Braidee, how did you decide to make the great twists on the really royalty trope and the competition trope?
Um, this was actually really fun to do because these are probably like in their traditional form, two of my favorite tropes in fantasy. But I suppose like the entirety of the plot itself is a little bit like, oh, those like Russian nesting dolls where it's like something within, like, you kind of just keep opening it and you're like, how deep does this go? Um, so like with the royalty side of things, like Ayala knows that she's royal. She's been banished and has been raised as a spy. So you've kind of like that's your first little nesting doll cup thing. And then like within that, she's kind of dealing with these two different identities, like how she was raised as like a child before 13 years old, and then like this new life that she's become accustomed to, which she absolutely detests. But it is also a situation of like the grass is never quite greener on the other side. And then I suppose in terms of the mission that she gets sent on as herself kind of really plays into that like the power plays and the emotional and mental manipulation that kind of takes place within the aviary itself. Because she's pretty much been told her entire life, like since she's been sent here, that she has to completely like abandon that other way of life and forget that part of who she is, only to then be told that she has to perform that role. So it's a little bit twisted. And then the trials themselves are kind of like a little bit similar. Like you've got this mission and she's going and she's infiltrating this kingdom and she has to compete in these trials. But then within that, that's kind of like the cover for a heist and a power play. So like, yes, she's there to like participate in these trials and hopefully win. But they're also there to steal a weapon. So it was fun to kind of have those different elements kind of and pulling them all together in a way that made sense without it being too convoluted. And it was definitely a challenge, but I'm really happy with how it kind of all came together and like really excited that it's still kind of like it feels like that favorite trope of mine, but it's just a little bit different as well.
Thank you so much. So Madeline, thorn shadow snakes, were you inspired by anything in particular, and do you imagine them looking like a specific species of python or constrictor?
So for the shadow snakes, so all of the reapers in this world have shadows. They can manipulate shadows, but Thorn, his became snakes, because he was born into very terrible circumstances where he was a captive from the day he was born. And what he really needed was a protector. So when his magic was forming, it formed into this thing that he can't it's part of him, but it's separate. Like he can't fully control it because he needed a protector, and that's what it became. So now he has these shadow snakes that slither around and keep everyone away from him. Um, and I imagine them looking like boa constrictors. Yeah, they're big and they're scary. I'm actually terrified of snakes though, so I don't know why I chose to do this. They're such a huge part of the story. And so like it's literally on the cover, but it's like nightmare fuel for me. So yeah,
Oh
but
my
I love it.
goodness.
Yeah.
Well, at least they're really cool. They are. Thank you so much. Heba, what was your favorite part of creating those lush atmospheric descriptions of settings, including weaving shawl, small cottages, and vast libraries?
So my goal when creating this book was that I would have three main characters, Lena, St. Silas, and Weaving Shaw. So I tried really hard to make Weaving Shaw a fully fledged character, even though it is a house, but I wanted to feel like it's living, and I wanted to kind of evoke different feelings and different moods from different characters in the book. So they all view Weaving Shaw in very different ways. Some characters love it, some characters hate it, and I wanted for the reader to always kind of be unsure about the house, but how they should be feeling about it. And I really enjoyed kind of building the lore and the atmosphere before we even step foot into the house. So I think that was a lot of fun for me. And I think once again, just putting all the gothic elements of my dreams into this book. So old cottages, dusty libraries, those kind of things. I just kind of filled it all up in the book because I love it. So I really enjoyed building the world.
Thank you so much. Keshe, one cool magical item in your world are books that record not just what's physically written, but also what's spoken around them. What was your inspiration for this, and do you wish they existed in our world?
Well, I just thought it was like a fun little thing because in the scene where they initially referenced it's because Harrisford has to find like a place in the library to like discuss their little sort of like, their little plans without being listened to by the listening books in the library. And I was always like, you go to the library and everyone like shushes you and like, in our world, it's the librarian shush you because like they just want to create like a nice, like calm, quiet thing. But in this world, they shush you because they don't want the listening books to like record everything that's like being discussed. And it can be quite funny sometimes what the listening books do record. But yeah, I think that I mean, like when you go through, I mean, probably like some of us have gone through a school or university or college or whatever, and had to write so many copious notes. Like I actually like about 10 years after I finished veterinary school, finally got rid of all of my vet notes, and it was like a whole bookshelf full of like those huge lever arch folders that was just like full of my writing, like terrible, messy writing. That I had held on to because I was like, one day I'll need these, I'll need them. And then obviously I never looked at them again after I left vet school. And then I just like ripped it all out. Like it just felt very cathartic, ripped it all out and I put it all in the recycling bin. And I was like, I'm never looking at you again. But then yeah, I just like looked at all this paper and I was like, oh my goodness, like this is like so many years of my life, like spent taking like meticulous notes. I was like, imagine if you could just have like books that just like did that for you. That would be amazing. But I imagine in this world also listening books would be quite expensive. So yeah, probably not accessible to everyone.
Um, Amy, your world has an autumn holiday named Vale's Eve. Were there specific celebrations in our world that inspired aspects of this?
Yes, Halloween, which I love. I love it so much. Samhain is my favorite time in the Wheel of the Year. So I wanted to have some kind of event that really leaned into the darkness aspect of Hellstromia because it's essentially a huge shattered city, black sand, big black pyramid, very goth ancient Egypt vibes because I was that child that was obsessed with ancient Egypt. Um, so Veil's Eve is kind of my mishmash of Halloween, but in this world, which is part of a longer festival of shadows. And yeah, Veil's Eve is really about, it falls on the autumn blood moon. It's about reconnecting with the capital because, particularly in this world and in Kara's home kingdom of Goliath, um, basically everyone that's poor does not get access to the same levels of information about the capital and about what happened and about the seers that the upper echelons of the court do. And so on this on Veil's Eve, it's about paying respects to Helstromia and having a night of darkness, no lanterns, no fires, everyone just out in Goliath, kind of congregating, but also it's a big night of whispers about people talking about what happened to the capital, why the seers aren't allowed in Goliath. There's lots of it's a very dangerous night because essentially the community gets together and trades information and their tyrant steward is not a fan of that because of course he is up here in the court. So yeah, it's kind of a couple of things merged into one, but yeah, very exciting, very exciting. I love the world building aspects of Romantasy.
Thank you so much. So actually on that note of ancient Egypt a bit, Braidee, what was your favorite part of creating the Sphinx's riddles?
Um, None of it. I think Amy mentioned doing some poetry before, and I really used to fancy myself a poet. I used to write poetry when I was younger. It was god awful. My grandma sent me one of my old ones that I'd written recently, and full body cringe moment. I told her to burn it, and that I never wanted to see it again. I had a much easier go at it for Songbird of the Sorrows, but I think it was really something that I wanted to include because part of the inspiration for the book itself did come from a poem. Um, and Sphinx herself as a character speaks like everything she says feels like a riddle. And of course, it's one of those things that I was like, what kind of rhyming pattern do I do? And I think I got too into completely blanked on the words right now, but I kind of like I focused too much on the minute details of it and trying to find the right words, and then I got to the end of it and I was like, does this even make sense? And then I was like, well, it's a riddle, it's meant to be hard to solve. I probably want it to be confusing. So that's how I landed on that. But I have continued to write more poems and riddles throughout the rest of the series as well. So apparently it's just something that I can't give up. Yeah.
And our last question is with Madeline. This is on the darker side of fantasy. Was there something you did during the writing breaks to clear away from the darkness and difficult subjects? Your mic's not on, sorry. Oh, there you go.
Got it. For me, the hardest part to write about was before the story starts, Ivy has lost someone very important to her, a mother figure. And she's still grieving that loss. And it's kind of what changed everything for her and made her sort of wake up to what the reality of her situation is. And as I was writing this book, I actually lost someone for the first time in my life, and I was grieving. And I put a lot of that into the story. And I thought a lot about characters who haunt the narrative. People that, by the time the story starts, we don't meet them, but we feel them throughout the story on every page. So for me, that was the hardest part. And when I was taking breaks, I just needed things that were light because I could not deal with any more sadness. I was having a little too much sadness. So I would read Tessa Bailey books. I don't know if you've ever read Tessa, but her books are very funny and very light-hearted. And then I also read Empire of Shadows by Jacqueline Benson. If you've read that, it's very Indiana Jones. So I would read things that were fun and adventurous and just would kind of pull me out of that funk. Um, yeah, that's what I did.
Thank you so much. So we're at the end of our panel. Thank you so much to all of our speakers, and thank you to the librarians who joined us today. The books from these discussion all come out in the next few months. So this is in release order. When I say your name, if you can say your book title, and then if you want to say the release date, and if not, I can say the release date. So Amy de la Force.
Hello, it is A Kiss of Hammer and Flame, out 2nd of December.
Which we are recording on the 1st of December, so it comes out tomorrow. So happy publication day, a day early for us. I'm on the East Coast of the United States, so at least a day earlier for me.
Thank you.
Braidee, Otto.
My book Songbird of the Sorrows comes out on the 3rd of February.
Madeline Taylor.
My book, Heir of Illusion, comes out February 10th.
Heba Al-Wasity.
WEAVINGSHAW comes out February 24th.
Keshe Chow.
My book Strange Familiars comes out on May 19th.
Thank you, everyone. Next, we have the final session of the day, the closing keynote with Michael Treats.
Thank you, Nicole.